Hi, this is the video for Monday, March 1st. Today we are looking at narration and structure. So we're starting that and it's going to last about 2 weeks. Here are the slides. I'm going to show you a glossary that I've made over the years for AP Lit. And then I'm going to model structure, purposes of structure, and ask you to do the same with the Joy Luck Club, which we're in the middle of reading. And then you can see the BGD. It's all about grammar and craft on Mondays, so today I'm just asking you to try to play a little bit with semicolon and dash. So let's get into it. Here's the unit still, the language will never speak. And the icebreaker that I'll drop into the chat as people come in it's about structure. So if you were to write the story of your life so far, where would you begin? Would you begin at the beginning? What is the beginning? Or somewhere else? Would you start now and then work your way backwards? Would you start in the middle of some defining event? So think about it and then jot down your answer in a public. I'm asking you to consider public chat today. I think this is really good practice for people to see the different styles of structure, but you, of course, may always opt for private. So this is our focus, and we've done a lot with character. We've looked into figurative language. We're going to spend 2 full weeks on structure and narration, and you can kind of see the way that will play out. We'll do 6 days because, of course, Thursdays aren't quite real in the way of standards. And so today, describe and identify how plot orders events in a narrative. Explain the function of that sequence and the structure in a text. Let's pause just to appreciate how simple this sounds. How plot orders events in a narrative, that sounds basic. Explain the function of that sequence and the structure. What are we having to do here? It feels like something elementary, but of course in AP literature, as you're probably starting to see, it's not easy. When applied to difficult texts, worthwhile texts, it's really challenging. And when you keep pushing on those ideas of how is this structured and why, there really is no limit to your analysis. The key questions that guide the analysis: to what degree does the plot's ordering of events honor, is the word missing there, a linear or a chronological sequence? So how much is this told in a chronological way? What do we gain, what do we lose by those degrees? What sort of complexity does this add? And lastly, why would an author select this plot structure over any other? So to what degree is it linear? That implies to what degree is it nonlinear? Why would they do that? Those are kind of the big bookends. All right, so here's a gift I've made for you. It's linked here in the slides, but it's also linked in Schoology. It's a long document, it's about 11 pages, of all of the literary terms that have come up in the years that I've taught AP Lit. So it's a conglomerate. I've copy-pasted from places. I've pieced this together every year. I might add a couple. And in it, you should find everything you need for your own flashcards. Some of you have identified that as a goal. So I'd suggest you use this. I'd suggest, if you're interested in those lit terms, to cut and paste into your own flashcards all of these terms. And you can see it starts with structure and narration. So all of the different words that make up the identification of structure. I'm going to scroll through and you're going to see tons of words you recognize, and that will be really reassuring to you. And then you're going to see some that you don't know, and I'll talk about those today. So you have to know this stuff because it comes up in the test, but I bet you do, because we've been talking about narrative elements since you all were in middle school. There's exposition, initial incident or initial event, rising action, crisis, climax, falling action, denouement or resolution, which we're going to call the same in this class, flashback, foreshadowing, conflict, internal conflict, external conflict. And then you get into structure that maybe is a little new. Linear structure, nonlinear structure, which includes in media res, framed narrative, a flashback narrative, or an epistolary narrative. So all of those terms I'd want you to feel really comfortable with by the end of this week. And then I'll just quickly scroll so you can see there's so many others in this document. So hop in here as you like and start piecing together your understanding of those terms. But back to what matters for us this week. So we want to identify structure first. This is what you need to identify in this class anyway. You need to be able to identify if a story is linear or nonlinear. And if it is nonlinear, you need to understand how is that framed. Is it a framed narrative where there's a bookend on either side? It's a story within a story. Is it in media res, which means you start right in the middle of the action? Is it a flashback? Is it an epistolary novel? Examples of each of these are going to come up as I ask you to reflect on that. I'll give you some now just to get you started. Linear structure is very basic. It's every nursery rhyme you've ever read. You can see there, Of Mice and Men, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Flies. Actually, that's a good example of one that could be in media res. So let's go to media res. And media res starts in the middle of the action. So if you read the book The Road, when they start that book, it's already an apocalyptic landscape. We don't learn about why the world ends until halfway through the book. A framed narrative is a story within a story. Classic example of this is Princess Bride. The grandpa is reading a story to his grandson, and that's the actual story we get to hear. There are others. We're going to read one this year. We're going to read Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is a framed narrative. Flashback is told entirely from the present looking back. So The Great Gatsby is a really good example of this. If you read that last year, Nick Carraway starts us at the beginning of the story, and then he goes and tells the whole thing looking back. Epistolary novels you've probably read. They're sometimes called alternate point of view narratives or alternate perspective or alternating person. There's lots of names for that, but it just means that the episodes of the book could change from different narrators. They don't have to. It could be a series of letters written by the same character again and again. Epistolary, if you think of it, the word sounds like episode, and that's what this is like. It's a series of vignettes of episodes. Examples include The Color Purple, which is a series of letters. We are going to look at one for sure. I won't give it away. And then others that you might have seen, The Poisonwood Bible. There are lots. They're becoming much more of a 20th century thing. How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accent. I'm trying to think of others off the top of my head. But it's going to be stories where it is these short vignettes. And before we get too far along in my examples, I'm actually asking you to come up with some. So take this brief questionnaire and try to come up with an example of each. So you're immediately applying that definition to books that you know. What's an example of a book with linear, in media res, flashback, frame narrative, and epistolary structure? This will take you hopefully just about 5 minutes to do. I will make sure your names can be recorded here. That helps me just identify who's got it and who might need a little bit more instruction from me. I say try to pick books you've read in school because that would be more helpful for others if I can use all of this data to show us some examples. So let's do a couple examples together after you've done that questionnaire. The first, I'm going to use The Story of an Hour because we read that. Hold on. Okay, so I'm modeling a couple. I'll move through them pretty quickly. The Story of an Hour. Remember, the questions are, to what degree is this linear? What do we gain? What do we lose by that choice? And why would an author select this perspective? If we look at the story and just kind of remind ourselves how it starts, it begins, one could say, at the beginning of the action, but we actually never really go back. We never go before this moment. And so I'm going to call this the beginning. It starts in this way and ticks chronologically through the events of an hour. That is really classic linear structure. So we're with Mrs. Mallard as she learns her husband died, as she moves up into the upper room to grieve and find that actually she feels free at last, body and soul free. And then she moves downstairs when he arrives home and she has a heart attack and dies. So from the beginning to the end, it's ticking away in this very chronological manner. Just because the first event is exciting or intense doesn't necessarily mean it's in media res. It would be in media res if it went back and tried to paint a large picture of life before that moment. So This is a linear structure. And I ask, well, to what degree is it linear? It's exceedingly linear. It's very traditional in its structure. And the second question, what do we gain? What do we lose? We don't really understand her life before this moment. We don't really get to see her with her husband and understand the kinds of affection she's trying to reflect on later because we're never there. But what do we gain? We are with Louise through this entire process. There's not a lot that she experiences in this moment that we're not also there for. She carries us along in this hour. We are a part of that hour. And as a result, when the surprise happens at the end, it is a surprise for everybody, for Louise and for the reader. We are on that journey with her, feeling the freedom she must feel and feeling the devastation that she must feel when she realizes she is again locked in this marriage. And so all of those decisions to keep us linear, it reduces or it completely eliminates any dramatic irony. We are not in the know. We are with her. And a lot of this narrative is about that, being with and understanding the inner impulses of somebody's soul. It's a real presence. So that's what we gain. Oh no, let's try it again. Icarus, going quickly. You could keep going. So we just did this poem last week. Is it linear or non-linear? What do we gain? What do we lose? And why would the plot structure be the way it is? Well, this one is a poem, right? But you can use the same principles. I'm going to focus on the form and the structure in a stanza break way. We get a pretty linear telling of the events. It goes from the event of his sort of supposed drowning that doesn't actually happen, and it jumps way ahead, so it's linear, but it's sort of jumpy, where he has this nice house in the suburbs, and he nightly probes his wounds and flies to the ceiling. He thought himself a hero, but he wishes he had drowned. Actually, it's really linear in many ways, with a lot of reflection. He's not quite going back to that moment. He's just reflecting. So I'm going to call this a linear structure. But notice some things that the author does to make it different because it's a poem in its structure. There's these bigger stanzas here, and let's call those epic stanzas, like mimicking the epic itself, mimicking the epic poetry of like the Aeneid or the Odyssey. It's not quite that, but it's got these long lines. It's got a bigger chunk of text all at once, which is very much in keeping with those traditions. And then towards the bottom, when all of that myth and the mythic qualities that he hopes for have disappeared, the stanzas are reduced, just like he is. And the lines start to shorten. And the last three lines are pathetically short. Commuter trains, committees. He wishes he had drowned. It dwindles, just like his life itself is dwindling. And that's the argument I'll generally make about these. That why would the author select the plot structure they choose over any other? Generally speaking, that plot structure is going to somehow match the content itself. So this is your challenge. In the class, I'll pitch this to people. What about this one? What about the Joy Luck Club? What's the structure? To what degree is it linear, non-linear? What do we gain? What do we lose? And why do you think Amy Tan picked the structure she did at this early stage in the book? You have a chance to show me what you think in your BGD if you aren't in class. So in the grammar and craft portion, I'll go through this pretty quickly. I just want you to play a little with dashes. Dashes and semicolons are identical in their usage in the way that I'm asking you to use them in the mid-sentence. Feel how similar they are. Feel how actually they are the same. The dash is casual wear. The semicolon is business attire. One is fancier, but they serve the same purpose. So you can see me practicing that. The story of an hour is ruthlessly loyal to a linear structure. The hour of the story is the only fleeting glimpse of freedom in Louise's lifetime before she dies. Semicolon and dash doesn't matter. Both break up two complete sentences. Icarus by Edward Field unfolds structurally in the same way as the story itself. The glory of Icarus's sky-high feat dwindles, just as the longer epic stanzas are reduced in their final sections. Semicolon dash, it's the same. So what you're really trying to do is find an awesome sentence to end it with and then just play around with that middle piece. Your sentence to finish is, the Joy Luck Club is written with a non-linear structure. The end.